our cabin in the woods. Diana and myself out in our cabin, and we're so proud of this place. We built it all ourselves. If you've seen my previous 3 videos about how we built it, the great foundation, the walls, the roof and everything else, then you will understand why we're so proud of it. Now, what did we do to make it special? Several things, and I'm going to go through them one at a time. Spend just a couple of minutes on each one. A little video, a couple of pictures, and maybe you'll pick up some ideas. That's the whole object here, is pick up ideas. So first of all, we're going to deal with this window. This wall here was a solid wall. So very simple, a very simple one here. We decided I didn't like that. We decided that we wanted the window in there, so I went and bought a window. It is 4 feet by 3 feet. And then with Diana's help, I set the window in there. It fit perfectly. I put several screws all the way around to hold it tight. I used a bit of caulking to make sure it was airtight. I put a piece of trim around what Diana did. Diana did all the trim, all that red painted trim that you see, around the shutters and so on, all the way around on the outside. I put a piece of trim on the inside. It was quite thick, thicker than the wall. So I ended up with a nice shelf up top on which we can place things. And it's great. We slide it open. Now we have a beautiful view. So that was one little extra. Extra windows in your cabin in the bush are always nice. Hey, second thing we wanted to do, you have to have a place inside to set things. You have to have a place if you're going to do any cooking, to prepare things like a counter. Let's call it a kitchen. So I made a kitchen for our cabin in the woods, and there it is. That's our kitchen. Doesn't look that much like a kitchen, but that's exactly what it is. I used some old leftover floorboards to make that wall. Makes it look nice. Cut a couple of pieces of plywood. So I got this piece of countertop and stuck that on there. That was easy. Painted the ends so it looked really good. The doors matched. Just that easy. Top of the countertop, I cut a hole. Yeah, my nice new kitchen, I cut a hole. There it is. That's the hole I cut. And with a finger hole in the middle because I wanted to have a sink. So there we are. There's a little bar sink in there. It's 15 by 15, 15 inches square. And it's got a drain, and the drain goes directly down and outside. Now, you don't have to have a P-trap because there's no smell, because there's no sewer. It just goes down and goes outside. It's surprisingly big inside. I think this is 24 inches across by 3 feet high. So I put a couple of shelves in here as well, and you can see we got lots of stuff in here. So I found this corrugated steel at a craft shop. It was cheap. I have $1.50 for a piece about 1.5 foot long. I found 4 or 5 pieces of that, put it around the back as a sort of a backsplash. These walls are very thick. So it's very, very easy to mount things on the walls. They're very strong, very thick. And so I was able to design these live edge walls. You can just go and buy a piece of live edge lumber. I think you woodworkers understand what I mean when I say live edge. And all it is a slice of lumber, but it hasn't been cut. So this is the bark from the outside of the tree. So that's a nice piece of lumber. You can see it under there and on top. And I cut that, fitted it in there, and actually stuck a piece of bark on here to make it look like the live edge went around the corner. It doesn't really. And over here, fits perfectly. A kitchen in our cabin in the woods. So we decided we would go with the modern way of having electricity in an off-grid, that's a certainly off-grid home, and we have a solar panel on the roof. There's a picture of it here, and the solar panel is the simplest thing in the world. Just a panel, you put it up there facing south preferably. In fact, you have to have it facing south. Up here for sure, up in the north. So we run the cord down from the solar panel, it comes down, and it goes into a solar charger, which is part of the solar panel assembly, and it comes out of the solar charger and connects directly to a battery. The next step is to, because most appliances are standard 110 volts here in North America anyway, and the next thing is to get electricity. You can't run a whole lot off of 12 volts. So we have over here on the side of the kitchen counter an inverter. This is an inverter. An inverter is, as its name implies, it simply takes 12 volt electricity from the battery and turns it into 110 volts. So you can plug things into it, just as you would in a house. And that's what the inverter does. So the inverter is connected by quite heavy cables to the battery, because there's a fairly high amperage draw there. And all the instructions are in any inverter. The cables come up through the floor, through a hole that I drilled, make sure the hole is filled so ants and other things can't come up through there, and protect the cables so they don't get chewed up. Comes up into the inverter. On the top of the inverter, there are 2 110 volt outlets, a couple of USBs as well, and I already. And then what I did was I took a very short, it's almost inobtrusive power bar here with 3 or 4 outlets. Fasten it under the lip of the kitchen counter right here so I can plug things into it. I also ran another cord and ran that cord down along the wall. I don't know if you can see it down there, Dan. You can see it, zoom. And inside that special electrical conduit, hard plastic conduit, and it runs over to the corner, right up the wall, and across and up to the far wall, up in the loft, in the bedroom. And that provides up there, I have an outlet, and that provides 110 volts if you need to plug in something, a light or whatever machine you might need to plug in up there, and a couple of USB ports. Now, over the wall over there, Dan, you can see that black thing on the wall? Over on the wall, there's a remote control. Most of the larger inverters have a remote control. Now, the remote control is not a really big deal. It simply turns the inverter on and off. It's like an on and off switch for the electricity. So that's mounted right by the front door. And now when you open the door of the cabin, you just reach in, click that on, the light comes on, 110 volt light, fan if your fan's turned on, and whatever else that you have already plugged in, that turns on the inverter produces 110 volts from the battery, and you have electricity in the cabin. It's really very simple. Now you want to have some creature comforts when you're in the cabin, so we'd have to have some furniture, yes, and they don't make furniture for cabins this size, so to some extent we built it. That's easy. We built this kitchen cabinet, it was easy to do. This is a blanket box. This is just an old blanket box that we had, a nice one. Blanket box, even blankets in it, and an old blanket box, and that looked really nice here. Right here against the picture window, you can sit here and chat and do whatever you want. It's padded nicely, a couple of pillows on it, that works perfectly. But we couldn't really find anything else that we liked. So what I did was built a, what is that, couch? I built a couch, bench couch. It's bigger than a bench, so it's really a couch. And it was the easiest thing in the world. 4 corners made out of 4x4. I put a shelf in the bottom, and I put around the top, I put, I don't know what these are, 2x3s, sitting on the 4x4s, and a sheet of plywood on top. Easiest thing in the world. But sometimes we might have a couple of the grandkids out, or my son, or my daughter, or somebody else, and for whatever reason, after a long, hard day of hunting, or walking around in the bush, they may want to lay down. So this is perfect. Sawmill Structures provides a ladder up to the loft. They do, and heck of a ladder, let me tell you. The ladder must have weighed 60 pounds. Yeah, they give you a couple hooks to hook it up there and so on, but it really, to be perfectly fantastic ladder. I'm not criticizing Sawmill Structures, but it was just too much ladder. So I built this. This is 2x4. And 5/4, full 1 inch, fairly wide rungs, and fairly close together too, because I'm old, and you can see here that well screwed, and we also have threaded rods, top, 3 of them, top, middle, and bottom, to hold the thing firmly together. Another small thing I did was up there, and that rack up there, the top of the wood, because there was hooks on there, they're sitting on wood, and it didn't slide very easily. Now it slides much more easily, you can see that. That's because I inserted a steel rod along that top beam on there, a steel rod on which these metal hooks sit. So you simply lift the bottom a bit, slide it in there. Bed of a deck, you can't go into the cabin and just fall down. So we built a deck, a nice little deck here. It's big enough, 6 feet across, big enough for a couple of deck chairs. A couple of things about this deck. Very solid, very simple. Really very, very simple, but it's quite solid as well. I built the deck, the base first, and put this rail on afterwards. Now, an interesting thing as well about this deck is it's not fastened to the cabin. Well, I shouldn't say it is fastened by a couple of screws, but it's not an integral part of the cabin. It's not part of the building. There's a reason for that. It's a very simple reason. I do not require a building permit. In this area, you don't require a building permit to build a cabin like this if it's under a certain size, which it is. But adding this deck would have increased its footprint, would have increased its area on the ground, and potentially created a problem. I would have had to get a permit, which costs a few bucks and so on. So I didn't fasten the deck to the cabin. The deck is, if you like, removable, portable, 2 screws gone. And you may notice as well this big box down here. Yeah, this big box matches the cabin. Custom made to match the cabin. Piece of steel left over from the roof, and all this wood down here, is the wood I took out of there. So we built a Wood box, yeah. So yeah, lots of wood down here. And maybe there's some ideas in there for you who are also considering a cabin of this type. Okay, that's it. Alec Peirce in the cabin at the ranch.